The galaxy shimmered beyond the viewport, a vast canvas of possibility and mystery. Ambassador Talan of the Illyrian Concord stepped forward, her translucent robe trailing like mist across the floor of the observation deck. Her species had mastered the art of diplomacy long before discovering faster-than-light travel, and now, after a century of preparation and careful monitoring, the moment had arrived. First contact with a species known as humanity. The humans have been observed at a distance, curious, volatile, and remarkably adaptive. Yet their recent unification under a planetary council and their outreach transmission spoke of progress, evolution. Talan had watched their recorded philosophies in raw, emotional music, and found herself strangely moved. There was beauty in their imperfections. Their vessel, the Kestrel, approached silently through the void, smaller than the Illyrian diplomatic cruiser, but more angular in design. It arrived precisely on schedule, gliding into orbit over the neutral moon selected for meeting. Its matte black hull bore no visible weapons, and that was the first note of dissonance. Every spacefaring species displayed some manner of defensive architecture, if only for symbolism. The human craft was almost too clean. Talan suppressed the thought. Suspicion at this stage could cloud the process. Her voice, harmonically modulated to calm and inspire, filled the deck. Prepare for reception. No assumptions. No missteps. The shuttle descended with quiet grace. Illyrian delegates gathered in formation beneath a canopy of stars, their breathless stillness mirrored by the flickering atmosphere domes that kept the air stable on this lifeless world. The humans emerged in ceremonial dress, dark blue garments marked with stylized insignia of intertwined wings and circuit paths, symbolic of unity and advancement, their envoy had explained. The lead human stepped forward. Tall, composed, and warm-eyed, he extended a hand in their ancient greeting. "Envoy Elias Mercer," he said, "on behalf of Earth's Unified Council, I bring peace and respect." Talan inclined her head. "Ambassador Talan of the Illyrian Concord, you are welcome among us. Elias Mercer. May our voices shape a new harmony." As the initial formalities passed, the two delegations moved into the temporary structure erected for this encounter, a crystallized dome grown from Illyrian biomaterials, light-sensitive and self-repairing. Inside, the temperature and lighting adjusted automatically, mimicking Earth's twilight. As a gesture of comfort, the opening discussions flowed with ease. Elias Mercer spoke of humanity's transition from fractured sovereignty to collective governance, their eradication of internal war, and their redirection of military resources into exploration and infrastructure. He shared holographic art pieces from across their cultures, sunlit meadows, thriving cities, even a spoken-word poem about silence in the void. It struck an odd chord with Talan. In turn, the Illyrians revealed their own history, a civilization that had grown through consensus rather than conquest, whose expansion had always been outward, never driven by desperation. They had long ago outlawed planetary-scale weapons, and their fleets were designed for rescue and relief rather than battle. The room was full of measured praise, polite curiosity, and cautious optimism. Yet not all were content to bask in pleasantries. Soria, the youngest analyst on Talan's staff, stood at the periphery, constantly processing human linguistic patterns and metadata. She noticed anomalies, phrases repeated with slightly too much precision, references to past measures that lacked context. Most odd was a lack of any visual history, showing human military vessels. For a species that had waged centuries of war, their visual archive seemed sterilized. Late that night, Talan sat in her private quarters, reviewing the day's dialogue. She let the silence wash over her until Soria entered, unbidden but not unwelcome. "You sense it too," Soria said quietly. Talan looked up. "They are skilled, perhaps too skilled." Soria hesitated, then showed her a fragment she had isolated from a human cultural data stream, one not included in official exchange. It was a news report decades old, featuring the decommissioning of Earth's last visible orbital weapon system. "But this," she said, "is followed by silence. No subsequent records. Just a sharp absence." Talan sighed. "It is not proof of deceit, but it is a question." The next day's session resumed with renewed energy. The humans proposed a mutual exchange of scientific insight, including limited access to their AI research and atmospheric stabilization systems. In return, they requested observational data from Illyrian wormhole mapping arrays. Fair trades. Balance. The kind that built peace. Still, Elias Mercer avoided all discussions of past warfare. When asked about historical conflicts, he offered broad summaries and focused on recovery rather than action. His speech patterns were meticulous, yet rehearsed. Privately, Talan invited him to the dome's central garden, an art installation grown from genetically encoded memory patterns. There, surrounded by living echoes of Illyrian emotion, she took a risk. "You've seen our heart," she said. "Will you show me your shadow?" Elias regarded her for a long moment. Then he smiled, but the warmth did not fully reach his eyes. "We left our shadows behind," he said softly. "We learned to live by the light." "But the past clings to all things," Talan replied. "Even stars cast shadows." His response was diplomatic, impeccable, and utterly evasive. When the human envoy departed that night, Talan found herself gazing into the heavens, unsettled. There was no malice in Elias Mercer. She was sure of it. And yet, a truth remained obscure behind those kind, careful words. She looked again at the stars. Still there, still bright. But the Illyrians had always trusted the stars. Now, Talan found herself wondering what might be waiting behind them. And so the meetings continued, with smiles and shared data, with translations and tentative promises. The humans asked for more access, more detail. And the Illyrians, still hopeful, still proud of their clarity, gave more. Yet always beneath the exchanges, beneath the luminous ceilings and fragrant artificial gardens, lingered the sense that something vast lay coiled behind those calm human eyes. Not a threat, not yet, but something too large to name. Talan recorded her final thoughts of the day in her diplomatic log, marking the entry with the phrase she reserved for all first contacts. "We have been welcomed. We are not yet known." The stars outside twinkled with ancient light, and somewhere beyond them a silence grew. Illyrian vessels were not designed for stealth, yet they could move with elegance that defied notice. Drifting near the orbit of the meeting moon, the Orelise, Talan's command ship, floated like a sculpture of light and will. Inside, however, tranquility was unraveling thread by thread. Soria's fingers danced across the data console, isolating yet another pattern. A power spike in the upper gamma band that did not belong to any registered human or Illyrian transmission. This was the third anomaly she had found in the past solar cycle. They weren't interference. They were positions, coordinates, traces of something hidden just beyond the edges of perception. "I've compiled everything into a condensed stream," she told Talan, "including sense of distortions during the envoy's last orbital descent. Look at the dispersion pattern. It's artificial. Something massive is refracting local gravity signatures." Talan watched the simulation unfold, invisible ripples blooming from a null point beyond the moon's far side. It wasn't natural, and it wasn't Illyrian. "There's something they're not showing us," Soria said, lowering her voice. "Or something they believe we are not ready to see," Talan replied. The command chamber fell quiet, the soft ambient glow of Illyrian bioluminescence casting shifting patterns across their skin. Doubt was a rare thing among the Concord's ambassadors. Diplomacy demanded clarity, intention. But now, clarity revealed the absence of information, and that made it worse. Talan summoned her senior analysts. They reviewed communications, holographic logs, even Elias Mercer's gestures and facial expressions. Nothing overt, nothing that could be called deception. But each message from a human envoy, each diplomatic phrase, carried a curated perfection that felt calculated. Hours later, a faint tremor passed through the Orelise. Not a physical impact, something more subtle, a lensing of nearby light, like a cloak briefly fluttering in a breeze. The Illyrians immediately activated high-spectrum scans. Nothing, only the void, as silent and impenetrable as ever. And yet, Talan felt a weight behind that silence. A presence too disciplined to announce itself. The next day, Elias Mercer arrived earlier than scheduled for their private exchange. He wore the same composed expression, but his eyes lingered on the star charts displayed across the chamber walls. "You've mapped the system well," he remarked. "Impressive." "Our probes reach far," Talan replied evenly. "They seek what is hidden." Mercer gave a small, measured smile. "Hidden things often stay hidden for good reason." Talan let the silence stretch. It was a technique. Ancient, Illyrian. The unsaid often revealed more than words. At last, Elias's tone shifted, subtle but undeniable. "We admire your openness, Ambassador. Humanity hopes for true partnership. But it is important to understand we live in a galaxy that is not always so welcoming." Talan tilted her head. "We have never encountered a threat that required secrecy." "No," Mercer said, stepping closer, "because your strength lies in visibility. Ours was forged in shadows. Survival demanded it." The implication landed like a cold weight on the room. Talan studied his face, searching for fear, pride, anything. There was only composure. That evening, Soria intercepted an encrypted human data burst bouncing off a relay satellite in deep orbit. It was fragmented, partially shielded by a rotating noise pattern, but the signature embedded within bore Earth's command-level encryption. Soria decrypted fragments. Fleet status redacted. Theta, 9 position confirmed, holds shadow pattern. The translation chilled her. Shadow pattern was not diplomacy. It was a term of readiness. Fleet readiness. Talan, upon hearing the report, did not react at first. She stared to the observation veil, the stars gleaming unblinking beyond. Then, quietly, she activated a secure line to the Illyrian High Assembly. "We have reached the threshold," she said. "Humanity is more than it appears. We must assume they are armed, perhaps vastly so." The Assembly responded with care. Observation only. No provocation. Let them reveal themselves. The message ended with a single directive: maintain peace. Prepare for fracture. Days passed. The talks continued. Mercer grew bolder in tone, more open about Earth's rapid adaptation to galactic society, more direct in requesting Illyrian support with long-range exploration gateways. Always, his words floated on layers, polished, persuasive, never aggressive. But something had shifted beneath the surface. He watched the Illyrians now not only with curiosity, but with calculation. Then came the disappearance. An Illyrian scout vessel, the Taliser, went dark near the system's Oort fringe. It had been performing long-range particle readings, its trajectory far from human traffic lanes. No distress signal, no debris, only the abrupt cessation of its data stream. Talan demanded an explanation. Mercer responded with concern, offered to assist in a search effort. But when pressed, he declined to allow Illyrian ships to enter several nearby zones, citing safety protocols. Talan didn't respond with anger. She simply recorded the coordinates of every zone they were forbidden to enter. They formed a sphere, not a random scattering, a perimeter. That night, she returned alone to the memory garden, the biological archive of emotion and insight grown into sculpture. The plants had begun to dim, bioluminescence reacting to her stress chemistry. She stood in the center, closing her eyes. In her mind, she saw Earth's open hand, offered in peace. And behind it, fingers curled into a fist. The next day, Soria brought her final report. "We confirmed gravitic lensing patterns consistent with mass displacement," she said. "Something enormous is stationed in high orbit. It matches no known design, and we never saw it arrive." Talan stared at the simulation, the massive silhouette only barely discernible by its distortion field. "It's been here the whole time," she whispered. "Watching us," Soria said. "Measuring us," Talan added. She looked again at the map, now filled with the outlines of invisible boundaries, erased scout paths, and cryptic transmissions. The Illyrians had not walked into a meeting. They had entered a stage, and the spotlight had never been theirs. She returned to the diplomatic chamber, her bearing formal, her voice calm. Elias Mercer awaited her, his eyes unreadable. "Ambassador," he said. "Envoy," she answered. "It appears we still have many truths to share." His smile was polite, unchanged. But now she saw it. He was no longer hoping to gain trust. He was waiting for the moment to decide what to do with it. Outside, the stars remained as they were, but the sense of vast, unseen motion had taken root. Something was shifting in the deep, something that no longer needed to hide, only to choose when to emerge. Taylan returned to her log that evening. Her final entry for the cycle read, "The stars do not lie, but they can be obscured. I believe humanity has not lied to us, only hidden their full face. I fear we have greeted not explorers, but sentinels." The sky fractured. No explosion, no tremor, just silence bending into something vast and wrong. From the moon's surface, the Illyrians watched as the stars vanished in a sudden, staggering eclipse. Above them, blotting out constellations like a closing eye, hung a warship. It had not arrived. It had unveiled. The vessel defied proportions. It spanned kilometers, yet moved with precision. Its hull shimmered as light fought to trace its outline, only to be swallowed by its armor's dark geometry. It bore no insignia, yet everyone knew who it belonged to. Humanity. Soria staggered back from her station, a half-formed warning on her lips. Taylan stared upward, not in fear, but in revelation. The shape was no longer hypothetical. The truth had descended. A transmission followed, brief and encrypted. Mercer's voice, calm and composed. "This is not an act of aggression. We've revealed Vigil to dispel ambiguity. It has always been here, cloaked, silent, observing. Humanity cannot afford to be misread." The phrasing wasn't defensive. It was final, not a justification, a statement of fact. Inside the Illyrian command dome, the air thickened with the pressure of possibilities. Taylan dismissed her aides and summoned Mercer alone. When he arrived, there was no trace of regret in him. If anything, he seemed lighter, as though some burden had lifted with the warship's emergence. "You hit a weapon platform the size of a city above a peace summit," Taylan said without preamble. "We position a deterrent," he corrected. "The galaxy is not governed by intention, Ambassador. It is governed by perception." "Then you never came here for quality," she said. "No," Mercer agreed. "We came here for survival. And for position." Taylan circled the room, her every movement deliberate. "You offered your hand in peace while aiming your fist behind your back." "We offered our truth," he replied. "It just required the right conditions to be heard." "The right conditions?" she echoed. "After you scanned us, probed us, doubted us," Mercer said, and now his voice carried a deeper undertone, not anger, but inevitability. "We've studied your kind for years. We know how the Concord responds to vulnerability." Taylan's composure did not falter, but inside, her thoughts raced. It wasn't only a power display, it was timed. The Illyrians had not yet relayed full information to the Assembly. The humans had made their move while ambiguity remained. The advantage was absolute. "I believed you sought unity," she said. "We do," Mercer replied, stepping closer. "But unity must be forged in truth. And truth, Ambassador, is not always comfortable. You wanted to see our shadow. Now you have." The chamber's lights dimmed, echoing the growing darkness outside. Vigil hovered still above the moon, its massive silhouette unchanged, indifferent. It did not fire. It did not move. But it reshaped every conversation, every equation. Later, Taylan gathered her inner council. Soria's face was pale, but her voice steady. They prepared for this moment. The data trails were curated. The timing is precise. This isn't a threat. It's an introduction on their terms. "And the Assembly?" one of the advisors asked. Taylan nodded toward the encoded transmission line. "They know. They're watching. But they haven't responded." The Illyrians were a species of consensus, not reaction. It was their strength, and now their delay. Mercer made no further attempts to explain Vigil. He returned to protocol, to diplomatic language, as though nothing had changed. But the rhythm was broken. Every word he spoke now weighed more than the last. Even the most naive among the Illyrians felt it. Something fundamental had shifted. Taylan chose to visit the human vessel, the Kestrel, alone. She requested no escort, no entourage. The humans, perhaps out of respect or calculation, permitted it. The interior of the ship was all sharp edges and efficiency, stark corridors lined with alloy composites, illumination regulated by motion. It was a stark contrast to the organic elegance of Illyrian design. This was not a vessel of aesthetics. It was a machine for movement, control, and endurance. Elias Mercer met her in a chamber shaped like a prism, its walls lined with displays, schematics, live feeds, telemetry from Vigil. He gestured to a seat. "You've had your demonstration," she said without sitting. "I've had your attention," he answered. "What now?" "You expect us to accept this as the price of peace. I expect you to understand us. That is the beginning of peace." Taylan allowed herself a silence. "Then, if we had unveiled a weapon platform above your Earth, what would your people have done?" Mercer paused. "They would have panicked, perhaps retaliated, perhaps not. And yet you wager that we would not. I wager that you would calculate before reacting. That's what your kind does best." She studied him. Beneath the diplomacy, he admired them, but admiration was not trust. It was a kind of reverence born of strategic awe. "You want the Concord to recognize your strength," she said. "We want the galaxy to understand that we are not to be managed." She left the ship in silence. As she stepped again onto the moon's surface, she looked upward. Vigil remained, a blade hanging in the void. She understood now what the humans had done. They had not come asking for inclusion. They had come issuing terms. Back aboard the Orelise, she called a private session with her diplomatic team. "Humanity does not seek alliance," she told them. "They seek relevance through deterrence. Their strength is now their voice." "And ours?" Soria asked. Taylan looked toward the stars again, the ones they could still see. "Ours is clarity, and clarity will be our response." The section ended not with decision, but with a reckoning. For all their preparation, all their wisdom, the Illyrians had underestimated one truth. Humanity had not feared the stars. They had come ready to replace them. The stars returned slowly, filtered to the gravitational haze left in Vigil's wake. The warship had receded into high orbit once again, its cloaking fields restored, but the illusion of peace was fractured beyond repair. Where once hung curiosity and ceremony, now hovered a fragile, calculated tension. In the days following the reveal, communications between the Illyrians and humanity slowed. Not broken, merely thinner, as though each side was waiting for the other to blink. No directives came from the assembly. Taylan suspected they were deliberating behind closed layers of consensus, debating whether diplomacy still held value in the shadow of overwhelming force. Soria continued her scans, logging every microdistortion Vigil left behind. It was a masterpiece of engineering, that much was certain, but its silence made it monstrous. Unlike any Illyrian design, which lived and breathed like an extension of its crew, Vigil seemed to exist independent of those aboard it. More fortress than ship, more verdict than message. Mercer did not seek out new meetings. He simply waited, and in doing so, dictated the pace of everything. Taylan knew delay benefited humanity. Every second without a response was a second in which Vigil became normal, a constant presence, not a sudden threat. Normalization was a strategy as much as intimidation. But Taylan was not idle. She convened with her advisors in the sanctuary chamber, where ancient light-reactive crystals absorbed every emotion in the room and diffused it as shifting colors along the ceiling. The colors this time were cold blue, violet, edged in gray. "Our analysis confirms humanity as weaponized patience," said Marith, a tactician whose mind favored strategy over sentiment. "They don't want war. They want psychological dominion." "They may already have it," another added. "Not a single fleet has moved in response. The Concord waits, and the humans know it." Soria broke in. "But they've not yet claimed territory. They've demanded nothing overt." "They don't need to," Taylan replied. "Presence is claim enough." She let the thought breathe in the still air. The truth sat heavy. "If we move to counter Vigil with fleet positioning of our own," Mara said, "we risk appearing hostile. But if we do nothing, we validate their show of power." "There's a third path," Taylan said. "We shift the conversation." The advisors looked at her, unsure. Taylan continued. We expose imbalance not through confrontation, but through transparency. We make the hidden visible, not their secrets, but ours. We illuminate what has been unspoken in every starfaring species. That fear builds policy. That assumptions shape trust. That strength alone cannot forge peace. And so they did. The next cycle, the Illyrians opened their archives to humanity. With a single transmission, they transmitted centuries of diplomatic records, logs of first contacts, internal discussions of power dynamics, everything the Concord had ever debated about fear and trust. It was raw, honest, unequivocally real. The humans, caught off guard, responded in private. Taylan stood again across from Mercer in the diplomatic chamber. This time, the atmosphere was different. The formalities still remained, but it was clear he no longer held the rhythm. You release your internal records to every known species, he said. Yes, Taylan replied, including yours. He regarded her with a mix of respect and calculation. You've undone centuries of Concord discretion. You've exposed strategic thinking that was never meant to be public. No, she said gently. We've exposed truth. It is not weakness to admit fear. It is weakness to hide it behind monoliths. He folded his hands behind his back, pacing slowly. You've reframed our presence as something reactive, as if we were afraid. You were, she said, without accusation, and it was justified. The galaxy is cruel in places, but fear is not absolution. Mercer nodded slowly, almost reluctantly. You've placed us in a new light, not as conquerors, not as victims, as participants in a larger pattern. That was always the truth, she said. You just didn't trust us to see it. For the first time since Vigil had shown its shadow, Mercer seemed uncertain, not regretful, but reevaluating. He looked toward the ceiling where soft patterns of Illyrian color undulated in slow, calm waves. What if someone else had shown such a ship? He asked quietly. Would the Concord have tolerated it? Taylan did not answer directly. Would you? He pressed. No, she admitted, but perhaps now we will. That admission hung between them like breath in cold air. It was the closest either side had come to concession, but it was enough. Afterward, the humans retracted nothing. Vigil remained in orbit, still silent, still cloaked from casual sensors. But Mercer began transmitting more than protocols. He shared fragments of Earth's own history of first contact, failed alliances, betrayals, overreaches of power, and he spoke of the void between stars and what lurked beyond them. The galaxy is not quiet forever, he said in one transmission. Eventually, something calls out loud enough to be heard by the wrong ears. We want to be ready when it happens. It was not a threat. It was a confession. Taylan logged it as a milestone, not in diplomacy, but in understanding. The Concord responded days later with a limited release. Proof of deep space probes lost to unidentified signals. Not weapons, but warnings, evidence that the void may indeed have listeners. What had begun as a silent war posture now drifted towards something else. Not friendship, not yet, but perhaps an honest equilibrium. Weeks later, during the last meeting of the summit, Taylan and Mercer stood together beneath the restored night sky. The stars are clearer tonight, he said. No, Taylan replied. We're simply looking at them without fear. He glanced at her, a trace of a smile forming. You're not afraid of us anymore? Oh, we still are, she said. But we decided that fear is not the same as truth. Mercer extended a hand, not an offering, not in demand. Just a gesture. Taylan accepted it. Above them, Vigil watched still, but the stars shone through its shadow.